How are you doing today? Let me adjust that. That looks about straight. I have like the sun setting over there, so half of my face is uh, shadowed. But there we go. Oh, the trials and tribulation of filming from home, guerrilla style. I'm just gonna wait for a few more people to show up, but Theresa Joy live here, guest reporting for Jordan Sheridan. Um, uh, if you haven't already, please check out Jordan's interview with Tim Canova on his lawsuit victory. I was going to do a piece today on what's going on there with Tim Canova and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. But Jordan's already done it, so it's up there. So please check out his interview with Tim Canova. And we are going to talk today about lies and corruption. Lies and corruption. I think that's what we talk about all the time. But it's not just complaining. You know, we do this so that we can spread the truth, so that we can make changes. That's the whole point of when we report on things, that we want awareness to be raised so that we can stop DNC criminal cartel. Oh dear. The DNC criminal cartel. I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. Who do you trust, right? It's we don't trust Democrats. We don't trust Republicans, but that's why we have to look at just who's running and what their policies are or what they've done in the past, as opposed to what party. Well, I would never vote for Republicans, so that's sort of pointless. But yeah, hopefully we can get some people in the as Democrats coming up that we can trust. So I'm just gonna start now. This is absolutely horrific because I have dealt with people who, this is about poisoned water. This is about the government lying to us and trying to cover up, because it has to do with the military. So, you know, they're choosing big corporations and the military over people's health. So the White House thought burying a report about poisoned drinking water was a great idea. This was in The Hill. This was in Politico. The Hill's headline was "Trump officials feared PR nightmare from drinking water standards." So what happened was there are new leaked emails that show that the EPA received a report from the Department of Health and Human Services back in January that chemicals being used by big businesses and the military have seeped into water supplies from New York to Michigan to West Virginia. And Scott Pruitt and the Trump administration have chosen not to tell the public. Not only have they chosen not to tell the public, but they've chosen to do nothing about it. So it continues, and it still hasn't gone public. The Department of Health report shows that levels of toxins endanger humans' health. They are deemed unsafe. They cause thyroid issues and cancer, birth defects, among others. But our EPA has chosen not to tell its citizens for fear, and I quote, "It would be a public relations nightmare." So Political, this was also in Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair headline, "White House EPA headed off chemical pollution study." The intervention by Scott Pruitt's aides came after one White House official warned that the findings would cause a public relations nightmare. Scott Pruitt's EPA and the White House sought to block publications of the federal health study on a nationwide water contamination crisis after one of Trump's administration aides warned that it would be a public relation nightmare. The intervention came early this year. Came as the HHS, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, was preparing to publish its assessment of a class of toxic chemicals that has contaminated water supplies near military bases, chemical plants, and other sites from New York to Michigan to West Virginia. The unpublished HHS story focused on two specific chemicals, PFOA and PFOS. States have been pleading with the EPA for help, and experts say that contamination is so widespread, the chemicals are found in nearly every water supply that gets tested. Yet, Scott Pruitt and Trump's administration have decided in their infinite wisdom that they do not want this to go public. 3 months it's been now since they've had this information. They have not told the citizens that they are drinking contaminated water. They have not taken any measures to stop the contamination of the water. And this was only found because, the emails were leaked. So the study would show that the chemicals endanger human lives. Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. So this is off of the ATSDR's website. Says, again, that's the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, says that our state health partners are investigating exposure to the possible health effects associated with PFAS in more than 30 communities across the United States. The health effects of PFOS and PFOA, the two chemicals that are being hidden from the public, that is in the drinking water right now as we speak. Health effects have been more widely studied and are linked to affected growth, learning, and behavioral or infants and older children, lowers a woman's chance of getting pregnant, interferes with the body's natural hormones, increases cholesterol, affects the immune system, increases risks of cancer, neurological damage. This is linked to all sorts of cancers. And I want to say, one of the main companies involved in putting out the PFOS and PFOA is 3M. I worked in Buffalo, New York for a long time. We have a 3M factory there, and there is a neighborhood that surrounds the 3M factory that an incredibly high number of people have neurological diseases. And I did an interview with a woman whose sister is, I think she's 29 years old. She's completely disabled. She wears a diaper. She cannot speak. She cannot take care of herself. Instead of talking, she makes sounds like a siren. The woman said, I don't know if it's a siren coming down the street or it's Becky. So I'm going to post my interview with her maybe today or tomorrow. And that is, she is talking about the real effects of the PFOAs on her sister. And she says so many people in the neighborhood have neurological diseases. So this is just in Buffalo, New York, where I interviewed this woman. But here we have Scott Pruitt and the entire White House hiding the fact that this study came out 3 months ago, that potentially millions of people's drinking water is currently toxic with incredibly high levels of these chemicals, and they decided not to come out and tell the public because it would be a nightmare, because people would react badly to it. But I do have to say there's more involved, because it does have to do with the production of weapons. Of course, why would they want to stop producing weapons or stop anything that has to do with the military? So the public media and, the details of the internal discussion emerged from EPA emails released to the Union of Concerned Scientists under the Freedom of Information Act. Now, back in January, these emails begin. Here's one of the emails. And I quote, "The public, media, and congressional reaction to these numbers is going to be huge," one identified White House aide said in an email forwarded on January 30th by James Hers, a political appointee who oversees environmental issues at the OMB. The email added, "The impact to the EPA and the Defense Department is going to be extremely painful. We cannot seem to get ATSDR to realize the potential public relations nightmare this is going to be. So, ATSDR, what was the full name? The Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry is pushing and was pushing Scott Pruitt and the EPA to get this information out to the public as fast as they possibly could. And this email is saying we cannot seem to get the ATSDR to realize the potential public relations nightmare this is going to be. Enk, a former EPA official, said she sees one troubling gap in the emails. They make no mention of the people who are exposed to PFOA and PFOS. There's no health concern expressed here. So I read a lot of the emails, and time again, they were talking about basically the military, the effects it would have on the military, the effects it would have on the companies, but they were not mentioning any concern for the people's health. Here's one. Pruitt's office said the EPA is eager to participate in and contribute to a coordinated approach so each federal stakeholder is fully informed on what the other stakeholders' concerns, roles, and expertise can contribute, and to ensure that the federal government is responding in a uniform way to our local, state, and congressional constituents and partners. So he's saying that they need to speak to their federal stakeholders and figure things out with the stakeholders before they make this information available to the public. So January, February, March, 3 months, 4 months. No, 3, because it was January 30th, as far as I know. 3 months have gone by now where they're continuing to let the public drink this poisoned drinking water while they're making plans with the federal stakeholders so that they can all be on the same page. That's very responsible of them. More than 3 months later, the draft study remains unpublished, and the HHS unit says it has no scheduled date to release it for public comment. So it's not even in the works that this information was going to be released to the public. Critics say the delays show the Trump administration is placing politics ahead of an urgent public health concern, something that they had feared would happen after the agency leaders like Pruitt started placing industry advocates in charge of issues like chemical safety. So yes, they replaced a ton of people in the EPA with literally people who worked for or lobbied for these chemical companies, huge corporations with huge plants who have been fined for all their toxic, putting out all the toxic chemicals in the past. They're actually all in the EPA now, working for the EPA now. So yeah, you don't really see them moving too quickly to help people from being sick and poisoned. That's not their concern. Families who have been exposed to emerging contaminants in the drinking water have a right to know about any health impacts and keep such information from the public as it threatens the safety, health, and vitality of communities across the country. Senator Maggie Hansen said, who has asked Pruitt and Trump to immediately release the study, and they have not. Senator Jean Shaheen, a fellow New Hampshire Democrat, called the delay an egregious example of politics interfering with the public's right to know, unconscionable that even the existence of the study has been withheld until now. The White House referred questions about the HHS, which confirmed that the study has no scheduled release date. So yes, the White House said, no, we have absolutely no plans on releasing this information to the public. And it's not even just about releasing the information to the public. You would think that the Environmental Protection Agency and the politicians would want to stop the pollution, clean up the pollution, make sure the water is clean for the people. So to take action on this, not only to tell the public that they're drinking toxic water, but to clean the water. You would think that that would be their job, the Environmental Protection Agency, but that's not their job anymore. That's not, they don't work for the people, the citizens anymore. Pruitt's chief of staff, Ryan Jackson, defended the EPA's actions, saying the agency was helping to ensure that the federal government is responding in a uniform way to our local, state, and congressional constituents. In his year leading the EPA, Pruitt has overhauled several scientific advisory panels to include more industry representatives and recently ordered limits on the kind of scientific studies the agency will consider on the health effects of pollution. Pruitt has also called water pollution one of his signature positions. The chemicals at issue in the HHS study have long been used in products like Teflon and firefighting foam and are contaminating water systems around the country. Like I said, in Buffalo, New York, where we have this entire community who has neurological diseases, who live next to the 3M factory. This has been going on for years. For years. The woman who I interviewed, sister, is 29, and this has been since she was a child. So, and the EPA, they knew about this. You know, the government knew about this problem in Buffalo, New York, and they did nothing about it. They fined 3M. 3M has been fined multiple times, but when you're talking about $1 billion company and you fine them a few $100,000, they just pay the fine and keep doing what they're doing. It's really not effective. So the company 3M, which used them to make Scotchgard, paid more than 1.5 billion. Sorry, so they paid more than one, but some of the fines are very low. But they paid more than 1.5 billion to settle lawsuits related to water contamination and personal injury claims, but they're still polluting. Nothing has changed, and we know that Trump and his administration has really gotten rid of a lot of the laws and regulations that were put in place to protect from pollution from factories. He's done away with the majority of those, so things are definitely going to be getting worse now. Some of the biggest liabilities reside with the Defense Department, and this is, in my opinion, where I feel like a lot of their reluctance to tell the public comes from, because we all know that the war industry and the Defense Department, that's a big business. So the biggest liabilities reside with the Defense Department, which used foam containing the chemicals to exercises at bases across the country. In a March report to Congress, the Defense Department listed 126 facilities where tests of nearby water supplies showed the substances exceeded the current safety guidelines. So 126 facilities. We're talking about military bases in the United States were shown to have water supplies that were toxic in the surrounding areas. But nothing's being done about it. A government study concluding that the chemicals are more dangerous than previously thought could dramatically increase the cost of cleanups at sites like military bases and chemical manufacturing plants and force neighboring communities to pour money into treating their drinking water supplies. So again, we know that our government does not want to spend any money on any kind of cleanups, Superfund sites. The Superfund sites, as of last year, they had no money for Superfund sites. And we all know by Flint, Michigan, that they have no interest in spending the money that they need to to make sure that people have clean drinking water, to make sure that people are healthy and that children have healthy futures. They're not even fixing the problem in Flint. Now imagine this comes out where we're talking about countless areas around New York, what was it? New York, Michigan, and West Virginia. I mean, from West Virginia, New York, Michigan, that whole area. And we're not just talking about one little neighborhood like Flint. We're talking about 3 states. So if our government doesn't want to put money forward to help the people of Flint, no wonder they're burying this report. EPA Chief Staff Ryan Jackson reached out to his HHS counterpart, as well as a senior official in charge of the agency overseeing the assessment, to discuss coordinating. So they're just saying, coordinating work with the HHS, EPA, and the Pentagon. So for some reason, now they're involving the Pentagon. So let's not tell the citizens that their water is toxic and stop drinking it. Let's bring the Pentagon in, because we need to involve the Pentagon in this. Now the Pentagon has a say on what? On what? On the health and safety of people who are being poisoned? They have to call in the Pentagon to talk about this? Because that's their top priority. The discussion about how to address the HSC involved Pruitt's chief of staff and other top aides, including a chemical industry official who now oversees EPA's Chemical Safety Office. So just getting in real quick, one of the people who is in charge of the chemical department of the EPA, Nancy Beck. Nancy Beck worked for Bush. She covered up a huge toxic crisis back then. She started working for Obama, but she didn't work for him for long, and then she was brought back when Trump became president. So Nancy Beck, Deputy Assistant Administrator for the EPA's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, suggested elevating the study to the OMB's office to coordinate an interagency review. Beck suggests it would be a good arbitrator to the dispute. Yogan Kothari, a lobbyist with the Union of Concerned Scientists, called Beck's January email extremely troubling because it appears as though the White House is trying to interfere in a science-based risk assessment. Nancy Beck worked for Bush. She started working for the OMB in 2002. She worked on a similar issue involving perchlorate, an ingredient in rocket fuel linked with thyroid problems and other ailments that had leached from defense facilities and manufacturing sites into drinking water of at least 20 million Americans. This happened before. So what I just said was this Nancy Beck covered up something in 2002 when rocket fuel leached from defense facilities and poisoned the water for 20 million Americans. And now she's working for the EPA again, and she's doing the exact same thing. Beck stayed on at the OMB into the Obama administration, leaving the office in January 2012 and going to work for the American Chemistry Council, where she was senior director of regulatory services policies until this year, rejoining the EPA. Last year she rejoined the EPA. So that's not a small thing. We have our president, the head of the EPA. They get this information saying that this incredibly toxic chemical is being found in water supplies, test after test after test in 3 different states, and it's coming out of the military sites is one of them, and they decided to not tell the public. to not release this information to the public. Now it's been 3 months, and it said that they had absolutely no plans as of now to release this study to the public. They don't have plans to release the study to the public. What about plans to stop the pollution? What is the chemical? The chemical is PFOA and PFOS. So, like I said, I interviewed a woman in Buffalo, New York, who lives next to the 3M factory. Her sister, in the water there, it's toxic, and her sister has a horrible neurological, it's not even a disease, she just has neurological damage where she wears a diaper and she can't speak and she can't take care of herself. And so many people in that neighborhood have the same neurological problems. So I interviewed her. I'll be posting that hopefully today. It's very sad when you sit in a room, you sit across from someone and you talk to them about their family member who would be healthy otherwise if the government didn't let people get poisoned. I mean, that her life has been taken away from her. And now with this report coming out and the whole White House and Pruitt and the EPA hiding it from the public, how many people will be affected like that? When are they going to come out with it? I mean, so this has been leaked. I guess all we can do is share this information, but the details aren't there. And they're definitely not trying to remedy it, not trying to stop it. So that is a problem. So here's remember Carrier? Remember all those promises Trump made? It was such a staple in his campaign, how he was going to keep the jobs here in the United States. And Carrier, the air conditioning company, they were planning on sending their jobs to Mexico, and Trump made a deal with Carrier to keep the jobs here in the United States. And he just talked about it everywhere he went. And he went to the factory and he spoke to the workers at the factory, at the Carrier factory, and he told them, I'm going to keep your jobs here. We're going to keep jobs in the United States. You're not going to lose your jobs. They're not going to be sent to Mexico. I'm giving the company, I think it was $7 million to keep your jobs here. And they believed him and they voted for him. Well, they just got screwed because 600 layoffs coming to Carrier plant Trump claimed to save. 600 layoffs now. 600 people, most of which they loved him. They believed him. So I would assume that most of them voted for him. They're getting screwed. Tea. Carrier plant in Indianapolis is scheduled to lay off about 600 workers by the end of the year. The plant was the centerpiece of a deal touted by Trump in December 2016. Before taking office, Trump unveiled a deal with Carrier, which granted that Carrier would continue to employ 1,069 workers for 10 years in exchange for $7 million in incentives. The deal was treated as a victory and made up part of Trump's plan to keep manufacturing jobs in America instead of moving them south of the border to Mexico. However, union officials said they've received notice that 338 layoffs will take place on July 20th. 290 more employees will be laid off December 22nd, just before Christmas, as it moves its manufacturing jobs to Monterrey, Mexico. And I remember when Trump went into the Carrier plant back in 2016, and it was around Christmas time, and he was specifically said, you guys are going to have a great Christmas. Now you get to keep your jobs. And December 22nd, 290 employees will be laid off right before Christmas. Many of those employees voted for Trump, who made saving Carrier's big, beautiful plant one of his most repeated campaign promises. It was part of his broader pre-election claim that a Trump administration will stop the jobs from leaving America. So what did these people have to say when they heard about this? They had a rally. They were pissed. They were swearing. They definitely turned on Trump and changed their opinion about him. And this was last week. Renee Elliott, a divorced mother of two who voted for Trump, said, "We took him serious." Elliott said, tearing up, because he did seem to be an entrepreneur. He knew this offshoring shit was going to go down, and I'm not going to stand for it, is what he said. That's how he made it sound. I'm not going to stand for it. She goes on to say, Hillary never said a word to us or about it. Obama never flew Air Force One to the facility like Trump did during his Indiana campaign. She goes on to say, I thought this man is not going to be anybody's puppet. It was an easy vote for me, not just because of The Apprentice. We believed in him here at Carrier, the vast majority of us. It was Trump Deluxe in there. I told people he's going to find a cause somewhere. He's going to be our savior. Little did we know that we would be screwed. To me, this is just political to make the victory within Trump's campaign in his eyes that he did something great. So that says a lot. They believed in him. She says inside that factory that he was our savior. And now they're all losing their jobs. Of the 1,069 jobs Trump claimed the deal would save, 730 were manufacturing jobs, and the rest were engineers and technical jobs that were not even scheduled to be cut. Hundreds of Carrier jobs will remain in Indianapolis right now. But, like Elliott said, and the other Carrier people who are being laid off argued that those jobs were office-based, not manufacturing line, and they were never in jeopardy to begin with. So Trump did nothing. He changed absolutely nothing. And if he does end up going on TV and saying that he saved some of the jobs, remember that the office-based jobs were never at risk to begin with. It was only the manufacturing line jobs that were at risk. And that's exactly the people who are losing their jobs right now. Another employee said, Trump saved some jobs, but he didn't save mine. Just don't bullshit us. We never thought the office personnel was going anywhere anyways. They're not making units. We are. We're the ones that made the $9.7 billion that they collected. We can understand companies having to go overseas if they're losing money. We get it. But Carrier is the top AC and furnace making company in the nation, getting money hand over fist. Last week, organizers, so they had this rally last week, and it was at a corner bar right by the Carrier factory where all the Carrier employees go after work, and it's usually full of happiness and joy. They said they're usually playing dice and drinking beer and having a great time. They had this rally there last week, and they were on fire. They were pissed. And these are the people who previously called Trump their savior. So he conned them. Last week, organizers with Good Jobs Nations, a Washington, D.C. based labor advocacy group, and a handful of local Democrat politicians and political hopefuls stood with a crowd of Carrier workers. They denounced Trump and Vice President Mike Pence. Obscenities were liberally employed. Chuck Jones, the former president of the United Steelworkers Local 1999 in Indianapolis, said, Trump is a liar and an idiot. He's a con man, pure and simple, who sold us a bag of shit. The audience clapped. He sold the whole country a bag of shit. The deal requires Carrier to employ at least 1,069 people in Indianapolis in order to receive the state incentive funding, which was $7 million. But workers don't believe the company cares that much about the deal and the fact that it makes $52 billion annually. So I don't think they built the facility in Monterrey, Mexico, just to have 4 departments there. It's a little too large for that. Trump repeatedly threatened during the presidential campaign to impose a 35% tax on companies that moved jobs overseas. So, is he going to tax Carrier for moving jobs to Mexico? We'll see. But my bet is no. And why? United Technologies, parent company of Carrier, which had a revenue of $56 billion in 2015 and owns Pratt and Whitney, has significant US military contracts. There you go. So, unfortunately, they trusted him. They trusted him. He said a lot of things to get people to vote for him. He said just the right things to get people to vote for him. And slowly, over time, we're learning that it was just another con. As if that wasn't very clear from the beginning, that this man was a lying, lowlife. Anyway, and I do want to also repeat the report that I did last week was, what was it? 37,000 elderly people received a letter in the mail last Thursday telling them that on July 4th, they would no longer have health care insurance, more than likely. That according to the new bill, that their health care insurance would be cut, meaning they would also be kicked out of the old age home, and that this letter told them, please find somewhere else to live, because as of July 1st, you're more than likely not going to be covered anymore. And it wasn't just elderly people, it was people with learning disabilities who are in homes, and people at addiction facilities who are, talk about the opioid crisis and how much our country, our president and his administration care so much for people. The opioid epidemic, I'm going to be hard on it. Trump said that he's going to arrest dealers. No, wait, he called for the death sentence for dealers of opioids, but he's not talking about pharmaceutical companies. But he cares so much about opioid addiction that he is kicking people out of homes where they're currently being treated to help them with their addictions. So and it scares me to even think that I still speak to people on a regular basis who are like, Trump is the savior from heaven above, savior from heaven above. I just wonder, what news are they reading? What are they hearing, or what are they not hearing? Because it can't be this. It can't be that 600 people are now going to be unemployed who were told that their jobs would be saved straight from this man's mouth. That 37,000 people in old age homes, elderly people, are going to lose their health care and be kicked out. They must not be hearing that. I don't know what they're hearing. That's our country. That's corporate media not really telling the truth. So, bad news. Seems like bad news everywhere. Here was a good thing that happened. I don't know if you saw this yesterday. I was all over my social media feeds, and I just love to see people get out on the streets and stand up for what they believe in. And this was a mass movement. Sorry, my nose itches so bad. Green tea, not beer. Not beer. I'm doing the Whole30 right now, but I'm a vegan, so that's almost impossible. Anyways, it's no beer for 30 days. No sugar. Anyway, so yesterday, the Poor People's Campaign, did you see it on your green tea? It's awesome. Did you see the Poor People's Campaign all over your social media feeds? Did you see the rallies? Did you see the marches? Did you see people singing? Whose streets? Our streets. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? I wish I was there. Anyway, The Poor People's Campaign kicked off 40 days of nonviolent protest on Monday, reviving Martin Luther King's anti-poverty efforts and demanding action. This was all over, but The Guardian reported hundreds were arrested as activists pick up where Martin Luther King left off. So, yeah, there were tons of arrests. I'm gonna bring it right back. How is it possible that you can have an administration and the EPA who knows that millions of people are currently being poisoned by toxic chemicals in their water and doesn't tell anybody, and they're fine and dandy, and they're driving around in their plush cars living their plush lives, and then you have people who are non-violent, unarmed, out on the streets, singing, joining in prayers, and trying to bring light to poverty in the country, and they're being arrested, and not Scott Pruitt and Donald Trump and the whole administration of people who, how is that even possible? Hundreds of low-wage workers, faith leaders, civil rights organizers, and liberal activists were arrested in demonstrations in Washington and in cities across the United States as they resumed the work Martin Luther King left unfinished. People marched in North Carolina, Missouri, and California, among many, many other cities. In total, the Poor People's Campaign said 1,000. Now this says 1,000 activists were arrested nationwide. Martin Luther King launched the Poor People's Campaign against economic inequality, militarism, and racial injustice. The new effort, the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is being led by incredible people, by co-chairs William Barber, a pastor at Greenleaf Christian Church in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and Liz Theoharis, an ordained minister and anti-poverty campaigner from New York City. And both of them were arrested. So you are going to arrest a pastor and an ordained minister who are literally just asking that people be treated with respect and dignity and be taken care of, and that children are fed, and they are arrested. In Washington, the group gathered on the lawn outside the U.S. Capitol to hear Barbara declare, "Something's wrong in America." The action on Monday, Barbara continued, was not just a commemoration of Martin Luther King's anti-poverty efforts. It was a new call to arms for the next generation, for us. Both Barbara, they were both arrested. The group hopes their actions will draw attention to what they say is an urgent need to alleviate poverty and improve living conditions for millions of people across America. I did just graze the surface on poverty stats. In 2016, the Institute of Policy Studies found that nearly 140 million people are either poor or low income. U.S. policymakers have increasingly ignored the needs of the very poor. The Republican-controlled Congress has slashed billions from the government food stamp programs and ended extended unemployment benefits that were helping more than 1 million people, long-term unemployed people. They have also cut funding to before and after school programs and Meals on Wheels. If you don't know what Meals on Wheels is, it is food that is given to elderly people. My Nana got Meals on Wheels. I have friends in Buffalo who got Meals on Wheels, and they were already telling me that things were bad enough because they weren't getting healthy food in their Meals on Wheels. Like, I have a woman, I love her to pieces. She is struggling so hard with health. She gets Meals on Wheels. She says she'd be lucky to get some fresh fruit or some vegetables. Like, it never happens. And now policymakers slashed Meals on Wheels. Build the wall, drop bombs, send the military to the U.S.-Mexico border, what other frivolities are we spending money on, but we're slashing Meals on Wheels and food stamps for citizens? Poverty is particularly dire for single mothers. A third of all families headed by single women are in poverty. Last year, that's 15.6 million families. In California, nearly 1 out of 5 residents is poor. That's according to the Census Bureau's supplemental poverty measures. Back to positive, the campaign list of demands. So this is the list of demands for the Poor People's Campaign. So again, the new Poor People's Campaign is called the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. So their list of demands includes that federal and state minimum wage laws commensurate for the 21st century economy, relief from student loan debt. Hey, it got me at the end. I'm sorry, my camera just shut off. It got me at the end. This was happening every 4 minutes for the lives I was doing for the past 2 weeks. And we started to think that it was on purpose. And I do want to talk about that before I sign off, just a chat between you and I. What kind of, I feel like we're being censored, seriously. But okay, back to the campaign's list of demands: the repeal of the 2017 GOP tax cuts legislation, restoration of the Voting Rights Act, an end to mass incarceration, a fracking ban, protection of public lands, a cessation of U.S. military involvement, and universal health care. Are they really asking for too much? Are they asking for too much? And it's mind-boggling that I could sit there and have a conversation with someone who is conservative and that they could tell me that these demands are not what they would want for the citizens of the United States, that these demands are wrong, that they wouldn't want this. I had a conversation with a family member last week. I was blown away because she basically was telling me that people who can't afford things like education or healthcare shouldn't be able to have them. So just because she was born to a certain lifestyle, because she was born in a family that had money to get her an education, that has money to pay for insurance and for her health, she actually believes that people who can't afford it shouldn't be able to have it. She believes that it would take away from her and her family. This is the mentality of some people in the United States. And I was shocked just because I thought she was a loving, caring person. I'm shocked all the time. So back to the story. The protesters will return each Monday for the next 40 days. Every week will focus on different groups of marginalized people. This week, the protests and activities will focus on child poverty, women, and people with disabilities. Other themes include racism, veterans of war, and the environment. At the end of the 40 days of protests on June 23rd, the activists from around the country will gather in Washington for a mass demonstration at the U.S. Capitol. Organizers say the 40 days of action are just the beginning of what they hope will be a multi-year campaign that will include voter mobilization and other efforts. The original Poor People's Campaign was in 1968, and it was organized by Martin Luther King Jr. in the months before his assassination. The centerpiece of the campaign was a mule-drawn caravan from Marks, Mississippi, which at that time was the poorest town and the poorest county of the poorest state in the nation. The procession arrived at the National Mall in Washington to join a national protest in Washington where thousands of impoverished Americans occupied the National Mall for 6 weeks in a camp named Resurrection City. And if you haven't seen that, Google it, look at it, watch the videos, look at the photos. Thousands of people were there. So this campaign is picking up on that. And it couldn't come at a better time, because poverty and just all the things that they're fighting for, end to mass incarceration, a ban on fracking, universal health care, these are the things that we need to push for right now. And we know that our politicians are doing everything that they can to avoid giving those things to us. So more than anything, we need to vote out the corrupt corporate shills and get people in who actually care. So yeah, I did want to mention just real quick, I don't know if you guys are getting notifications. I'm getting a lot of messages from people that they don't get notifications, that their accounts are marked as no longer following Jordan's page when they are supposed to be following. And it's really strange, because when I was doing my lives for the past 2 weeks, I was getting all these problems with buffering, where the lives were getting cut off, and then I switched to my own personal account, which I have nothing on that page, but I have an account just to test it out. And I just did a live, and it was fine. There was no buffering problems. There was no connection problems. I wasn't cut off. And then when I came back and did it on Jordan's channel, immediately I was cut off. So I don't know how far censoring goes and what kind of control they have. I don't know that that's really what's happening, but it seems very odd. So anyways, please always, it's the YouTube conspiracy, Jordan says. It friggin' is. I mean, they're really censoring us, and I feel like they're targeting, oh, I can't see anything. I feel like they're targeting Jordan's channel more than anything. I mean, for the simple fact that I did a live on Jordan's channel, and I was having constant problems with being cut off. And then I went to my channel and immediately was fine. So please always check that you're still subscribed and you're still marked to get notifications to his videos, and also share and like and get the word out. So Jordan was able to go out in the field recently. He was in West Virginia. He was covering the tree protesting the pipeline down there. Press all notifications. Jordan says press all notifications. So anyways, he was covering the tree protests. He was covering the primaries, Democratic primaries down there. He also interviewed people about a compressor station that they want to put in that has to do with pipelines that gives people benzene, rare forms of leukemia. So he was able to go out in the field and work again because of your subscriptions to Patreon. So thank you for that. That's awesome. Hey, we have a new reporter starting as well. Good friend of mine. Just, you're going to love him so much. Marcus. He's coming on sometime. I don't know if this week or next week, but he'll be reporting, and we're going to be setting up lives. So it's going to be like me and Jordan and Marcus, lined up throughout the day. So if you pop on the channel, you're bound to see one of us. Marcus is incredible. You're going to love him. And I worked with him in the past, so he's coming on soon. So the goal of Jordan's new journalist team, Status Quo, which hasn't launched yet, is to get other journalists out into the field the way he was in the past and the way he did just last week, to just speak to you, to get your stories, to interview you and spread the truth about what's really happening in this country, the truth that you won't see in corporate media, the truth that the politicians sure as hell don't tell us, to get real stories out from real people across the country. So if you haven't already, and you can, please subscribe to Jordan's Patreon, whether it's $1 a month, $5 a month, whatever you can afford. And hopefully he can launch Status Quo and then get other journalists out there in the field. And, what the goal is to change what's happening in this country. And I think it's such a perfect time because elections are coming up, and we really need to inform people about the real problems so that they can take a look at current candidates who are failing to address those real problems. And, I felt like there was something else, but now I can't remember. Oh, and check out, I have my interview I'll be posting today with the woman who is affected by these chemicals, her sister, an interview with her. And I did a really good interview with an amazing woman. She is the founder of Black Moms Rock, Tanisha Suds, and that should be coming out today or tomorrow or sometime this week, about basically how in professional industries like law and other professional industries, Black people are being discriminated against, and they're watching us. They're watching us. I just got cut off again. That's why I'm saying that. They're watching us. Anyways, keep watching for oh, you did research on PFOs and they are worse than faded away. Yes, it doesn't take much. Oh, there you are. They are worse than dioxin. They are bad. When you see the interview I have with this girl and you hear about her sister, we don't want that in our water. And the fact that our own government literally is hiding this information from maybe millions of people, it's, what can you say? Anyways, thanks for joining me today. I will be back later this week, and get excited for Marcus. You're going to love him. You're going to love him. And yeah, check out Jordan's report that he did with, oh, where did I have it? I just want the wording to be perfect. His report with Tim Canova about his lawsuit victory. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.